Hey everyone, Jordan here again. This is day 2 of my daily videos on trying to express the harm of circumcision and what solutions we can try to figure out for that. And today I want to talk about an aspect of the problem, which is the psychological side of it. And this is something I'm really passionate about. I've been interested in psychology my whole life. I went to Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, and got my 4-year degree in contemplative psychology. And I'll tell a little bit of my personal story. While I was at Naropa, I took a class. I actually took 2 classes during the same semester. One was abnormal psychology, and one was a class called Learning from Trauma. And in the abnormal psychology class, we studied a lot of different disorders. One of those was post-traumatic stress disorder. And I actually had all of the symptoms and all of the symptoms for it that you can have, which is like 40 something symptoms or something like that, which is insane. You only have to have like 20 or 30 something to qualify for the diagnosis. And I had really severe PTSD. I also was suicidal. Literally every single day I wished I wasn't alive for around 2.5 years, a little over 2.5 years leading up to that point. I was unbelievably upset about circumcision all the time. I'd get triggered hundreds of times a day. Anything from seeing any child under the age of 12 would trigger me and put me into the state of absolute panic and withdrawal and internal, just this horrifying state. And externally I learned to just act relatively normally, but inside it was hell. It was like a living nightmare. Every day was like living literally inside of a nightmare. It's unbelievably painful, and I've heard so many men describe their experiences in exactly the same way that I described them, or that I experienced them. And so many of these men just don't understand that what they're experiencing is actually categorizable as PTSD and often depression and perhaps other things as well. And it's really important that we start spreading awareness of this, that this is a problem on a psychological as well as a physical level, because circumcision is extremely damaging physically, and we have countless evidence of that. That's what the procedure was designed to be. It was designed to be harmful, both in the American medical system as well as in its ancient rites. We have a lot of people who have explicitly said that, who are proponents of the practice and say, the reason we're doing this is because it harms sexuality. That's the goal. And only recently was that recanted in the 1960s when we decided sex was a good thing. So it's physically damaging, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. But even more clearly, in ways that we can clearly test. You can test for PTSD quite easily. There's just a list of questions that you answer, and we could easily show that there are so many men who are suffering from this. And I read their stories online, and it's just obvious. All of the things that they're reporting are symptoms of severe trauma. And not only is it important to understand this, so that we can understand the problem and why we need to end circumcision now, It's also important because we need to understand how to help men who are circumcised, who are suffering from this trauma and this psychological stress. And when I took the healing from trauma class, I did exercises every week. There were some things that I did and just took a few hours a week. And after doing these exercises every week and getting this psychoeducation to understand what trauma is on a physiological level, on all different levels, and understanding that and then working with it, in my experience, I no longer qualified for PTSD after just a couple months of this class that I took, which is amazing. You know, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and I don't say that lightly. I haven't had an easy life necessarily, and yet this horrible, horrible experience of trauma was hugely helped, not 100% by any means, but hugely helped. I'd say 80 to 90% of it was cleared away within those first couple months. I'm still working through the other 10 to 20%, which, don't get me wrong, is huge. Even just 10 to 20% of what I experienced is horrific. I'd say now it's actually more like 2%, but even that's still pretty horrific. And I'm still working through that 2 years later. So by no means take this as, well, we can just treat the post-traumatic stress disorder, but we can treat a lot of it. And a lot of circumcised men who are suffering from this don't know that, and we need to get the word out about this so that we can develop more tools specifically for circumcised men, because, you know, the psychological stuff, it works pretty universally for different kinds of trauma. But I think if we make it clear that this is for circumcised men who are suffering from trauma specifically, that would attract them much more to want to take a program, you know, if it was kind of marketed. And I don't mean that in terms of selling, but just in terms of saying, you know, this is something that can help you if you're circumcised and you're suffering from that trauma. And market that directly to them and say, you know, this is for you. This is to help you with the emotional distress that you're in, because that can be helped. Even though there's a limited amount that we can do for the physical problem right now, and we're working on that with places like Foragen, and, you know, there's certainly foreskin restoration that I would encourage any man to do that can help with that. But on the emotional side, so many men just aren't getting help, and it's awful. I didn't get help for years, even though I knew a lot about psychology and had done therapy before and gotten help for other things. I mean, for one thing, my psychologist dismissed me when I brought this to him, and that made it really hard, even harder than it already was for me to understand that it was a problem that can be helped psychologically, because he directly dismissed it and told me I should get over it. It was towards the beginning of when I was starting to be suicidal. And so we need to educate men that they can get help with this. We also need to educate therapists, and that's another goal I have, is to educate more therapists, so that as this problem grows, as more men become aware of the harm that circumcision does, and this issue becomes more mainstream, which I think is really going to happen in the next couple of years, then there will be help for all these men who are suffering, because there's already a lot of men are in a lot of pain around this and don't know that they can get help, and in many ways there aren't that many therapists. There are actually quite a small number who directly deal with this issue. So those are my thoughts on it. I'm, currently in the process of working on developing an online trauma treatment program for circumcised men, and that will hopefully be developed in the next year, so that anyone can go online and just do the program themselves, like I did. just do these exercises on their own. And I'd also really like to develop a resource for therapists, that therapists can learn about this issue and learn the techniques that are most effective in healing it. And so any therapist who knows about this issue, who is informed about it, and who would like to work with me on developing a solution, on helping educate more therapists and developing a program for men, or any men who are traumatized and want help directly. I'd love to talk with you and see what I can do to help you. So yeah, anyone who has any interest in any of those things, please reach out to me. You could email me at jordan@foregen.org, FOREGEN, and yeah, let me know. I think this issue is so important, and thank you for listening. Talk to you tomorrow.